Evening all. I'm just checking audio on the Play Chess server. Hi Nc3. Any audio? Hi all, also on Twitch as you join this. The audio is okay? Okay. Someone's notified me on YouTube about Gligoric passing away today. Unfortunately, one of the chess greats, Svetozar Gligorić, so Serbian origin, born 1923. So rest in peace, Gligoric. I've got a bit of a cold. I hope I can go through a few key games. So basically, just some quick background from Wiki, which you can get from Wiki. There's an excellent page. During the 1950s and 60s, he was one of the top 10 players in the world, also among the world's most popular, owing to his globe-trotting tournament schedule and particularly engaging personality. And Wiki mentions his autobiography called "I Play Against Pieces." So he titled his biography like this, I think, to emphasise no hostility to the opponent or playing differently for psychological reasons against different players. So playing the board, not the man. So actually that kind of philosophy is also clearly shared with another player I greatly admire, David Bronstein. I think Botvinnik was trying to make the match personal, but Bronstein was more interested in the creativity of chess, the interest of chess, and so a lot of dynamic players are really more concerned about the beauty of the game and not crushing the opponent psychologically or whatever. So anyway, let's have a look. In particular, he was a great King's Engine defense player, I noted, and one of the fantastic King's Engine games he played was against Tigran Petrosian in Zagreb 1970, and I actually used a similar sort of theme actually later on, and it's against the very dangerous variation considered nowadays against the King's Engine called the bayonet attack. But remember, this is 1970. The bayonet attack against the King's Engine is very popular at the moment. So by the way, how is the board on Twitch before I go on? Is the board okay? Hi Twitch everyone, I'll just move the chat down, I can see. So I hope sound and board is okay. Okay, so this game had a big influence on me, and you know, maybe made me less scared sometimes of the bayonet attack. So let's have a look. D4 from Tigran. So the King's Engine defense, knight f6, g6. So white establishes a broad center of pawns in the King's Engine defense, and d6 now. And this line in particular, which we're coming up to in the main line classical, after d5, knight e7, is this quick b4, which is all the rage at the moment, called the bayonet attack against the King's Engine. So white is really accelerating the attack against the exploitable base of the pawn chain. So in theory, you're supposed to be, technically according to Nimzovich, the base of the chain. In practice, you have to pick the more exploitable base of the chain, and d6 is the most readily exploitable target of the pawn chain. And you know, if the pawn chain gets undermined, it falls like a pack of cards sometimes. If that goes, then e5 is weaker. So it's a very aggressive plan. A slight downside, technically, of the plan, it does weaken a bit, this diagonal. And this move was quite trendy at the time, and played a lot, I think, today, knight h5. So it's, you know, it's often in other variations, the knight is going to d7 or e8 just to make way for f5. But here there's an extra emphasis on the diagonal, because white's played that potentially weakening b4, so the diagonals have got a few more exploitable targets than usual. But one issue about knight h5 is, you know, is it a tactical liability in its own right if it ends up on f4. You know, off the player with white can either chase it with g3, you'd think, or just snap it off and maybe potentially break through the centre with e5 later. So we see knight d2, and the knight is already challenged, and knight d2 is of course going to be useful usually in the King's Engine for something like c5 and knight c4, just accelerating the attack on the exploitable part of the pawn chain. So knight f4, the knight's not going back to f6, the f pawn really wants to roll forward here. Okay, and white is not concerned in this position with the light square bishop. Actually, he carries on, Petrosian carries on with, you know, the queenside advance, a4. Okay, so why isn't white concerned about the light squared bishop in this position? Well, I think the key thing is really to get on with an attack. You know, with an attack on d6 could be accelerated. So knight actually, it's an aggressive piece though. It is near the white king, and you'll see something quite fascinating about this game in relation to this knight on f4. Okay, you would think later it's going to have to move when white plays the move g3. Okay, so f5, and now it's almost as if Petrosian wants to create some regret. You know, why didn't you snatch the light square bishop? Okay, I'm going to move it now. I'll play bishop f3, and this does reinforce the e4 square as well. It seems fairly logical, and it seems logical that white will kick the knight with g3 soon. Okay, Svetozar plays g5, and with this it looks as though, well, hold on, if white captures away from the centre, which you're not really supposed to do, white does get the e4 square, which when you get a knight on e4, statistically that will win games against the King's Engine defence. A nice secure knight on e4, but in this position, you know, black's got some dark square play, counterplay, so it's no real big deal. And also we have this idea that surely this knight's going to be kicked away from f4 soon. Okay, you know, but the thing is, the dynamic players emphasize that chess isn't so black and white, so simple, and it's not just about material, but the dynamic piece quality and, you know, potential of the overall position. So okay, we get e takes f5, which looks logical. White will secure the e4 square for a knight and try and deprive black of counterplay. And there are many games of Tigran Petrosian against the King's Engine, even Fischer, where he's got this kind of almost bear grip over the whole position, where even Fischer couldn't generate that much counterplay against Petrosian on the white side. So how will this game be different? Okay, where will black's counterplay be created here? So knight takes f5, and we finally see this move g3 here. Okay, and you might think, well, surely, okay, is the knight going to move to d3 or something, or check? Is that any good? Well, okay, so here, if you want to play chess, please hide the game score notation tab. If you can click on opening book, so we can play this guess the move game more interestingly. So if I give you 20 seconds here, what move do you think black played in this position? So 20 seconds starting from now. Okay, none of you have really guessed it on the stream at least. The thing is, you know, the dynamic players, they feel the isolated pawns. It's not about calculation at all. The isolated pawns are felt. The scopes of the bishop is naturally felt. So how can you cripple white's king side and fill the isolated pawns? Well, the move knight d4, because if white's going to take this pawn, he's going to isolate two pawns. You're going to get a good bishop. You're going to get use of e5. And you're going to have pawn mobility as well. You're going to get an extra pawn to play with on the king side. And Kasparov has indicated, you know, if you get pawns next to the opponent's king, they can always act as extra pieces sometimes. But also there's this potential for this pawn mass to really drive, for example, this bishop back. This bishop to end up here, hitting one of the isolated pawns. And this pawn mass potentially to drive this bishop away. And maybe even this queen to come here later. These isolated pawns, once they become isolated without the g3 pawn, they become much easier to attack. Okay, the bait is taken. Tigran does take this knight on f4 in this position. So can we demonstrate the dynamism against Petrosian here? Well, in this position, actually, forget chasing the light square bishop back. It's actually taken. It's taken. Okay, so that's one less piece on the board. Queen takes f3, and now actually the queen is driven back with g4. And actually it goes to an awkward square, a strange looking square in this position. Tigran is not keen on a normal looking square here. A normal looking square might not do, that's the thing. If queen e4 or d3, then maybe bishop f5, and then maybe e takes, then maybe this diagonal is a bit of a pain. As well as, you know, queen h4 and then bishop e5 and then f3 and then h2 will be a target. That's the basic idea, and it's a brilliant idea, really. The queen wants to stay around the king here. It actually goes to h1, believe it or not. It goes to h1, but we start to see the dynamism unravel here after e takes f4, because we have now, you know, these pawns are quite menacing around the king. This bishop has been extended in scope. In particular, it's got e5, which you can target an isolated pawn. The queen's been given access to h4, so there's a lot of dynamic trump cards being generated by this knight sacrifice. Okay, and white is without, of course, the thin-shattered bishop protecting the light squares. So in this position, okay, the knight on c3 is also loose at the moment, attacked. It's protected in this position with the move bishop b2. Okay, but now simply just increasing pressure across the centre with bishop f5. Okay, and white plays rook fe1, and now we see f3. So it seems as though the queen is now a prisoner on h1. But I guess Tigran's thinking, well, you know, is it that bad? I can maybe play h3 later, and the queen's not that bad, surely. And f3 is a target. Well, okay. Knight d e4 is played, and now we see queen h4. So the black pieces are starting to install themselves, looking at both, staring at both of these isolated pawns. And, you know, maybe ganging up soon. And maybe this rook can also switch across if only f6 wasn't guarded. h3, okay, that gives the queen technically another square, queen h2, as well as threatening hg now. Now we see bishop e5. Okay, so this is a very dangerous position now for white's king safety. You see that the isolated pawns are kind of starting to struggle. They're starting to bear the weight of a bit more pressure than existed in the position before. And there's also potentially this idea of g3, if only this knight wasn't guarding over these key squares all the time. Okay, rook e3. But here, of course, black can play g takes h3. He does that, why not? G takes f3. But he's sacrificing the f3 pawn. But it does mean h2 check, and also maybe this g file is going to be dangerous for the white king here. So anyway, at least the queen sees the light of day after queen takes f3. And now a double attack on the queen with bishop g4, double attack from the bishop and the rook. So the queen has to go back to that miserable h1 square. Okay, now we see check, and the king goes to g2 in this position, which actually guards over h3. If it went to f1, you know, maybe bishop h3, but here the rook is guarding h3. So you might think, well, what's the concrete threat here? The knight is defending f2. Okay, well, what we see is a typical sort of pattern in many successful King's Engine games, where you end up, you know, using the f-file. Particularly, you're trying to put more and more pressure on certain soft spots around white's king, and here queen h5 intensifies the pressure for bishop f3 to be made possible. So in this position, white now takes the knight away from e4 and protects f3 directly against this bishop f3 check. Now we see bishop d4, and it looks as though the fire is now on f2 and this diagonal. This f-file is a bit nasty. So here, Tigran's not concerned too much about the exchange. He's more concerned about his king surviving. So queen e1, but the exchange is not taken here. Black wants to intensify the pressure, not lessen the pressure, and doesn't mind even offering the exchange of rooks. With the simple move rook e8, it intensifies the pressure, and it's protected of course by the queen on h5, so this would be nice to occupy that central file and carry on the attack if possible. Knight c e4, it looks indecisive play. Did the other knight really, was this really the plan all along, for the knights to exchange places on e4? Well, here also the bishop is hanging, and you might think, well, in this position, what's actually the problem with taking that bishop? Is this an amazing kind of piece sacrifice? Okay, bishop takes b2 is played, and then we see rook g3. So a lot of ideas of rook g3 in this position. Well, most notably f3, but also to offer the exchange here, which could backfire on the king. There was a spectacular game Petrosian played against Spassky, where he basically hijacked the whole position with some sacrifices, exposing black's king safety. So black has to be careful. He doesn't want to take that rook. He wants to again intensify the pressure on white's king position here. And he plays the move bishop e5 to do that. And now the other rook comes in via a3, ready to recharge its fellow rook and to carry on this pin, and maybe to threaten f3 again. It's unpinned now with king h8, unpinning the bishop. King h1, and then we see rook g8, and it's really quite hard to defend this position now. Okay, white tries queen f1, and now the sacrifice of the exchange is accepted. Bishop takes g3, but is there going to be a hijacking in this position? Well, you've got to be careful about these squares and this diagonal, but this has been looked at and deemed not too dangerous at the moment. Rook takes g3, and actually we get a crushing final blow in this position, which I wonder if you can spot if I give you 20 seconds. So a final crushing move now is played. So 20 seconds starting from now. Okay, I hope you can all spot it. Rook takes e4. So it factors in that queen a1 will be harmless and knight e4 will be harmless. If we look at knight e4, then check, and that's quite embarrassing because this is ouch town. Yeah, end of game. It's going to be end of game. And the queen a1 is pointless as well, of course. Anything rook e5 will do, I imagine. or maybe even queen e5 is possible here, hitting the queen, being able to get the rook back. So there's nothing for white. So white was really quite crushed. And this game inspired me to play this knight sacrifice against Goldberg, which is on my YouTube channel, and that was a great game. I'll give you the link, and when this goes on YouTube, I'll give you the link to that other game. So, but this was awarded in this tournament the Brilliancy Prize. So this is brilliant for the King's Indian players against the bayonet attack. So an early bayonet attack, and this just whole concept of sacrificing the knight on f4 is to me, and I hope to you, a beautiful, dynamic idea in the King's Indian defense. But there were other beautiful dynamic ideas which Gligoric introduced, and which players like Fischer definitely credited Gligoric for many of the amazing ideas you find in King's Indian games, and some of Fischer's King's Indian games. If you want to sort of look at classic King's Indian games, Gligoric is a great player to look at, and this was a brilliancy prize in the King's Indian. So this idea of installing the knight on f4 and just letting it sacrifice itself. So I hope some of you are impressed by this game. if we just quickly play through it again. So the whole knight sacrifice. So at this stage, maybe some of you didn't look that dangerous or convincing, but it's the pressure points. With these pawns being isolated, these pressure points can be picked on much more easily, much more exploitable weaknesses. These soft spots around white's king, and this awkward queen position looks. Black's pieces are just springing into life, and the e5 square in particular is great for that dark square bishop, as we saw. And the intensification of pressure, not letting Petrosian hijack the position with counter sacrifices, but intensifying the pressure, and only really accepting material when he's pretty sure that there's no problem. There's no hijacking of squares going to take place in this game. So Petrosian really got smashed in this game, and it got the Brilliancy Prize. So there's that one. I hope you enjoyed that one. Let's go on to another game. Right. So I've got a game selection here, and now let's look at another world champion. And another King's Indian game, this time against Vasily Smyslov. So this was apparently, according to ChessGames.com, one of Smyslov's shortest ever games, perhaps the second shortest ever game of Vasily Smyslov. And he had the white pieces, and it was a King's Indian start to the game, sort of, but an early deviation actually. So g6, and now not the traditional, central Croatian occupation, rather, not Croatian. It plays actually, Smyslov plays the cautious and unusual looking bishop g5. So how to react to bishop g5 here? Well, sometimes as in the King's Indian, you can accelerate attacking the center. You don't always have to prelude d6 with e5 and c5. Sometimes you can strike a blow with c5 quicker, and I think there's a Greek WGM who's got a book on the King's Indian who's emphasized this acceleration. But here, this is a 1959 game. So these ideas that we see sometimes today in King's Indian books, they stem quite way back in time. This accelerated attack on the centre, c5, straight away, why not? Okay, it's a temporary pawn sack. So white has two major options. Maybe d5 or take the pawn and see where is black's counterplay. Well, white did take the pawn here. So where is the ferociousness of black's counterplay? Well, okay. Svetozar plays knight a6 here to try and regain that pawn, and you know, maybe Smyslov is thinking, well, you know, I'm just going to casually put more pressure on d5, I'll fianchetto the bishop, put more pressure on d5, let black waste time, you know, taking back the pawn, and then get an iron grip on d5 surely. Well, knight takes c5, bishop g2. So superficially, you know, would you say here, if I asked all of you, would you say white has superficially a comfortable position from this particular opening after move 7? So bishop g2, do you think white's position is quite comfortable here or not? Do you see some quite dangerous counterplay evolving from the black side? If I give you 20 seconds just to do an evaluation of the position, not calculation, evaluation, do you think there's any dangerous counterplay on the cards? Let's get to rights. I like both colours on stream. The chess wedge looks safe for white. Okay. Is this safe for white? The fianchetto is neglecting surely the c4 pawn, isn't it? Is this a bit casual? Is this a superficial control of d5 here? You see, this is the big question mark. This c4 pawn is one of the big question marks here. Black's plays an accelerated attack on the centre, and the closest pawn we have to a centre pawn is this c4 pawn. Can black get now an attack on c4, which will be very useful? Well, he plays actually d6, which means actually he's not routinely castling. He's going to maybe target c4, and this knight is actually protecting b7 from this bishop at the moment. Rook c1, white's not also playing stereotypically. He's concerned about c4, and maybe he's prepared to defend c4 if needed with knight d5, and surely that will be the end of the story. Okay, black now castles. Now, instead of the routine looking knight f3 move, this wasn't played. Here, Vasily maybe misjudged the position. Maybe the position isn't that bad, but maybe, you know, he's thinking this bishop could be harassed if he plays knight f6, knight f3 rather. What about knight e4? That hits the bishop. That would be quite annoying, wouldn't it? Because then, you know, if you took, for example, this would be very annoying and very embarrassing, this kind of pressure. And you don't want to lose your dark squared bishop to a measly knight like that, do you? Or maybe you do. Okay. But what to do about b2 here? This could be awkward. For example, queen c2, bishop f5. You could get in big trouble here. So maybe this explains why in this position knight f3 wasn't played. This knight, while the bishop's eyeing e4, why not kick the knight? Surely white has time to kick that knight away from c5. So white plays b4. Now actually, I know from bitter experience that you know, this bishop can be like a rock filer along the diagonal, and you know, you don't want to make, you know, a rock filer you know, angry. Yeah, and a move like b4 can, you know, make this bishop quite angry on the diagonal. So b4, do some of you have some doubts now about you know, white's position in this position? Are there any doubts emerging right now about white's position here? If I give you 20 seconds to evaluate this position. Okay, so Chess Wizard likes black better now. Okay, so we see in this position the move knight e6, which unfortunately for white, it harasses that bishop, and you know, sometimes this bishop g5 in different openings does lead to major disasters for white. I think, you know, one of Fischer's classic wins against one of the Byrne brothers had an unfortunate bishop, I think, on g5. But here, you know, it seems, you know, white hasn't got to castling yet, and he's harassed his dark square bishop's being harassed. Okay, he has to move it, perhaps, instead of protect it. He moves it back to d2. And now we see a5, and white doesn't really want to give up the c5 square. Strategically, that will look a bit horrible. So white protects the b4 pawn with a3, accepting a slight downside that black's going to now get the a file, and black does take on ab and get that a file. And you might think, well, that's not such a big deal, surely, in this position, this a file. But now we see the move knight d4, and what does knight d4 actually say to white? One of the things it says to white is that if you play knight f3, you might have to accept double pawns, because if you play this, then bishop h3 is now possible, stopping you castling. That's one of the things perhaps said by knight d4. And if you're really going to have double pawns, that's going to be a bit grim to have to take like this. So here, white, Smyslov, plays knight h3, and then we're back now to our old friend on c4 to be targeted. And it may be seemingly a bit nitpicky to attack this pawn, c4 pawn, but this is a major source of counterplay quite often in different opening systems, just attacking c4. And so the attack on c4 is made clear now with bishop e6. And white's planned defense is used, knight d5. Okay. But remember, we've kind of enraged the bishop on this diagonal, because these moves enrage the bishop. And we've also enraged the rook on the a file. Okay, so black now takes on d5, and after c takes d5, believe it or not, in this position after bishop d7, white could be in very, very serious trouble. In fact, engine evaluation I've checked earlier, this is really getting quite grim for white in this position. Bishop d7 also, it carries with it some sneaky threats like bishop a4. Imagine if white castles here. It may be that bishop a4 is actually quite a dangerous move in this position, or there might even be other dangerous moves. But bishop a4, that would be quite embarrassing, I think, to have something like this. Isn't it forcibly like winning the exchange? It'd be quite nasty, wouldn't it? Bishop a4, for example. But there might even be stronger moves. So in this position, after bishop d7, it seems this isn't at all comfortable for white, this position. So Smyslov is concerned about his queen not having too many squares, maybe, and that might help explain the next move, rook c3. So at least the queen can sort of maybe go to b1 if it's attacked with bishop a4. Okay, so but bishop a4 is not used here. Instead, first rook a2 is played in this position. And again, we must consider, what would happen if white castled here? What would be the punishment in this position for castling? Or is there a punishment? Well, springing to mind without much calculation, tell me if you see any better. But it looks as though knight takes e2 check might be on the cards here, because we would have bishop takes c3, and that looks fairly embarrassing. But maybe some of you can see stronger. Just let me know if you see stronger here. But that looks quite punishing in its own right. Just knight takes e2 check here if white castled. If you want a few seconds just to check that position for yourself, would you agree knight takes e2, or is there something stronger? If I give you 15 seconds, I think knight takes e2 is quite convincing. There might be something stronger. Anyone? I think knight e2 is convincing. Well, let me know if you discover something stronger. Bishop a4 is a good candidate for something stronger as well. Actually, bishop a4. Bishop a4, bishop b5. These look pretty strong. This could really embarrass the queen. Or queen b1, no, there's rook takes d2, yes. And knight and queen e1. Someone's saying look at bishop b5. Okay, so we can celebrate the black position now in various ways after castling. We can agree on that. Bishop b5 is also dangerous here. Okay, maybe rook e3 though there. So I think knight e2 looks like a clear-cut forcing move after castling. Okay, so in the game though, castling was ruled out for whatever reason. For the move queen b1 now, hitting the rook. Okay, and the rook is resourcefully protected with a really neat move, which is really neat to play if you can get to play these queen moves. Queen a8. So now white can't castle for the simple reason, of course, that the bishop's hanging, can't castle. So Smyslov plays rook c1. And now, believe it or not, the final move of the game, this is an 18th move. Can you guess what black plays here which causes white to resign? And even more impressive is not just guessing the move, but to know all the reasons behind why this move wins. Would be really, really impressive, because it actually forcefully causes a weakness of the last move. It's a forcing move, that's a clue, and it's causing a weakness of the last move which can be tactically exploited with more forcing moves. So what does black play in this position? If I give you 20 seconds starting from now. $5 points for finding the move, 50 for understanding the reasons why the move is so brilliant. I admit I had to cheat. I checked with an engine before as a little bit of preparation. I do a tiny bit of preparation with this stuff. No, it's not bishop b5, it's not knight c2. Oh dear, oh dear. Oh, this is good. It's not knight c2, it's not bishop b5, it's not rook a1. Although rook a1 might actually be a strong move, actually. We need to check out rook a1. Hang on, rook a1, let's just check that out. Why would that be ruled out? I'm not sure. It might actually be a strong move. I don't know. Queen d3. I should have checked this with an engine, but okay. Queen d3. I don't know if white's holding on here. Maybe not. No, but there's such a clear move. Beautiful. Okay, someone's got it, Chess Wizard, but have you got the reasons for this? Alright, bishop f5. What would be the reasons why this is so destructive in this position? It's basically forcing white to do what? What is this forcing white to do? I'm sure you can all guess what the forced move is now. If I give you 10 seconds. Now, try and guess what the force move is, which I'm sure you can all do. But what then is the weakness of that last move? What is the weakness of white playing e4? What weak squares are created if white plays e4? Okay, you're saying e4, 5 points, but what weak squares are created by playing e4? Here, Smyslov resigned. He saw it. He resigned here, but if we look at e4 now, what does black play in this position? based on the weaknesses of the last move. Weaknesses of the last move. Yeah. What does black play in this position? Have a check. Queen a6. Queen a6 might actually be a really strong move. Actually, Queen a6 might actually be a strong move. Possibly there's other ways to skin the cat here. But there's a very simple move, very simple forcing move in this position. Yeah, just bishop takes h3. Come on, bishop takes h3. Forcing move. Another weakness. You pounce into f3 check and you win this bishop. It's a disaster. So bishop f5 calls resignation. Simple, really. See that? So that was 18 move win against Smyslov, 1959. Let's have a look at that again. So some little excuses for huge amounts of counterplay. The bishop, the c4 pawn. You know, maybe that's all you need sometimes to create huge amounts of counterplay. And of course, another excuse, this huge diagonal weakened. And the pawn was also, of course, leveraged to open up the A file. So we get all of black's pieces springing to life, really, don't we? And it seems, you know, this retreat is really nasty, actually, for this bishop a4. So white is really in big trouble in this position. And, you know, can't castle. Couldn't castle. It's really quite a crush, isn't it? There's no bishop e4, of course. You just take the knight. Alright, let's look at another game. So, okay. So actually, I think, because I'm not sure how much my voice is going to hold up. Still got a bit of a cold. Let's go on to a more high-profile game than this one. I'm going to change the order a bit. Against Mikhail Tal, let's stick with world champion opponents for a moment. And maybe next time look at some more games. I'm just going to cough. Bear with me. Okay. Excuse me. So Mikhail Tal against Gligoric, Belgrade tournament 1968. Okay, this is great stuff. I'd love to play classically one day. e4 and e5. So we get our classic Reuter pairs. a6. Bishop goes back. Knight f6. Oh dear. Pardon me. White castles. So, yeah, this is a classic position. Bishop e7. I think what we're going to get is actually, funny enough, the Smyslov Defense. I know we just looked at against. I think this variation is called the Smyslov variation. So this d6 here, supporting e5. Okay, it's introduced by, I think, Smyslov. Okay, so h3, h6. So the idea, one of the ideas, is now, well, to play rook e8 onto this d4 with rook e8, to put the bishop here, potentially, to maybe strong point e5, maybe to encourage d5 later. Knight d2, bishop f8, knight f1, bishop b7, knight goes to g3. It looks fairly routine, but black is kind of creating this threat now of wanting to play aggressively on the queen side with this sort of stuff, as though, you know, the c file is going to be significant down here, And one of the ideas of that might be to encourage white to play d5. So knight a5, and also of course attacking the light square bishop at the moment. That wants to be preserved. Bishop c2. Knight c4 is an interesting improvement of the knight away from a5 to b6. If it gets kicked, it can go to b6, and you can still play c5. Okay, so a4 is played here. But actually, c5 is not used now. Sorry, change of plan. In this position, and I think we've seen this in some games of Magnus Carlsen's black in this system, we get a huge amount of central tension now out of this pawn move that's played, d5. So look at all these pawns staring at each other, a huge amount of central tension caused with d5. So it kind of looks visually impressive, doesn't it, this position? How many of you have had this position as black? Do any of you play classically like this and have this position as black, out of interest? If I give you 20 seconds to answer that. Do you remember having this system as black? Actually, the knight is also supporting e5, isn't it, here? Otherwise, e5 would drop. So anyway, it's an amazing amount of central tension. White wants to now kick the knight from c4. So he plays actually b3. The knight's refusing to go back. Instead we see d takes e4. So this bishop's been extended in scope. We're opening up all the lines, aren't we? Knight takes e4. Now knight takes e4, bishop takes e4. And some exchanges, bishop e4, rook e4. And here, okay, the knight still refuses to move back because it's holding up e5. If the knight moves back, e5 will drop. If it goes back, you know, knight e5. So counter-attack again with queen d5. Counter-attacking on the rook. But we're talking about Tal here. Is Tal meekly going to put the rook back or just go for your king? Goes for the king, doesn't he? All his vicious threats have now emerged off the rook g4, and I've just killed the game score. Whoops. How do I get the game score back? I'm going to have to repaste the whole game, aren't I? Move 20. Oh, man. Let's see if I can just paste and go back to move 20. So in this position, after queen d5, rook g4 is played. So would you be a bit frightened against Mikhail Tal that, well, you know, this stuff looks dangerous, doesn't it? Well, the bishop is designed to defend the king here. Okay, so in this position, the knight is also still attacked, as well as this poor pawn, which is now pinned. You know, this pawn's pinned. So the knight has to be moved. Surely it does move. And so, what is black getting for this pawn sacrifice? Well, actually, he's got pressure, counter pressure now on b3, hasn't he? But he's giving up a bit of king safety, isn't he? So, okay. And you might think, well, c4 is out of the question. You can just take that. Okay. So white takes on h6, which looks dangerous. Black takes on b3. Now Tal counters with rook a3, hitting the knight. That's defended with bishop b takes a4. After rook takes a4. So what's the outcome here? Is this rook actually misplaced, potentially? Is this bishop misplaced? Can black use this b file? Well, he does make use of the b file. He plays rook a b8. Offering actually a6, which you might think could be useful as well. Could the rook swing around at some point? Could that be useful? Rook takes a6. But now e takes d4, and it looks as though, hold on a sec, this rook's quite good. If this rook's misplaced, this rook is also looking quite good on that e file. C takes d4. And here, this looks like a gambit now. Black has actually played a positional kind of gambit. And he's also gambiting a bit of his king safety, surely. So what has he got in terms of pressure here? He plays actually the move c5. which does celebrate the knight on b3 because it is targeting d4 anyway, so put more pressure on d4. Okay. The bishop comes to defend, it seems, d4, and that looks reasonable, but more pressure is brought to bear now on d4 with rook b4. So the question remains, is this rook misplaced? Is this rook slightly misplaced? Well, now rook g5 hitting the queen, and the queen hits the other misplaced rook, or is it, on a6. And that rook now joins the attack, rook h6. So, is Svetozar, he's invited the rooks for dinner here, where dinner is the king in this position. So, can black really get away with this strategy against Mikhail Tal? Can he really do this? Belgrade 1968 tournament. Well, he has got the d4 pawn to take, finally, and he does take on d4. Okay, which reveals actually some issues for white, because when we played queen b7, it wasn't just attacking the rook, it was also creating this battery on b1. So actually in this position, rook b1 is now threatened, skewering the queen to the king. So is this a difficult position here? You know, can black have a good position from this position? You know, here. What if Mikhail actually invited rook b1. He played knight takes d4, inviting rook b1. Now, before we get into that, then there was bishop c1. But before we get into that, what if white plays? Let's imagine white plays king h2. Is there a big problem with king h2 here? If I give you 20 seconds to look at this, and I'll try and think about it as well, what's the big problem with king h2 in this position? You know what? Okay. Well, what I see is, I think I'm in agreement with EventDate. I'm not sure for the same reasons. I think bishop d6 might not be hot, as mentioned by Gligorić on Play Chess, because rook takes d6. But you know what? I think check is dangerous, because if rook g3, maybe bishop d6 now, with the queen protecting the bishop. And if g3, I wonder, in this position, we've got rook b1. And if the queen, moves off f3, then that's a disaster, isn't it? You take on f3, you take here, and you take here. That would be a disaster, wouldn't it? So imagine rook g3 is forced, bishop d6. That looks pretty terrible for white. So maybe this possibly explains Tal's choice. In this position, Tal played knight takes d4, and we have this kind of queen sack, or no, sorry, not queen sack, pardon me, we have an invitation for rook b1, not queen sack. Bishop c1 is played, and okay, so what's the score here now? This is still dangerous for black's king, surely. Well, black now plays queen. So he's a piece down for a moment. He plays queen b2. And this looks kind of tricky for white, doesn't it? Or can white just go for the king now? So if we took this, basically, if we took this check, it looks a disaster. I mean, it looks okay for black. In any case, so what Mikhail did was Queen H5, which looked quite tempting. You know, threaten mate. Looks pretty dangerous. We get now no check, a bit of a counter attack after King H2. A very nice move is played in this position, and black needs a very nice move, otherwise black has had it. The king is going to get slaughtered here. So what did black play in this position? If I give you 20 seconds starting from now. Okay, I think we can rule out Queen F4, surely. If Queen F4, aren't you going to run out of checks after G3? You're going to get mated on H8. Lose 20 points, I think, unless you've got a brilliancy here. Sorry, hang on, Queen F2, that's not brilliant. Hang on, forget G3. Rook G3 I meant Rook G3. Sorry, Rook G3, no. Now you're in trouble, aren't you? What do you play here? That's what I meant. You're up for the chop now, aren't you? Yeah? For Rook H8. So no, it's not that. No. The move played was Bishop D6, deflecting, you know, the rook away from slaughtering the king. Bishop D6. So taking, and now Queen F4 check. And now safely taking on D6 without getting slaughtered. And, you know, lo and behold, black is the exchange up here after all that. Tal played knight F5. It's still pretty dangerous stuff, though. This looks like slaughter time still for most of us. But in this position, and I'm wondering about this position. If I've got a misprint here, black seems to have played. No, it's not a misprint. Black played Rook E1. I was hallucinating that white had Rook G7. Of course, the Rook is pinned in this position. The Queen is being left and pre, because if Knight takes D6, then Rook H1 is mate. So there's no Rook G7. So this looks dangerous for white again. It seems that the attack has rebounded. It seems white's king safety is more in question than black's king safety, which is a great trick if you can manage it during the game, if you're playing black especially. So, okay, in this position, Tal resorted now to a desperate little tactic, which doesn't really help much his position. He played Queen takes F7, which picks up a pawn, but he's fundamentally the exchange down here. He's the exchange down after all that. Check. And not only that, this C pawn's a dangerous pass pawn here. So knight F5. But note though, if he gets this pawn, he's got you know, running pawns. So what we see now is Rook B7. Check. And in this position, Gligoric is not greedy. He knows that sometimes, you know, one pawn can be faster than two. So actually, in this position, he takes that knight. Great endgame move. Can learn about endgames from these games. So I'm hoping to improve my endgame all the time. Open to understanding ending. So just sacrificing the exchange, just for the running C pawn. Get behind the running C pawn. And this looks like the active king here is great compared to white's king. And this secures the win, believe it or not, after all that. So king G3, C4, there's nothing really stopping the pawn. c3, the pawn's storming off. Rook a6, c2, and here Tal resigned. So that was a crazy tactical battle. In this position, the king's really going to push that pawn forward. White resigned here. I hope that's fairly clear in the final position. But navigating out of that, inviting Tal for the attack, getting his own counter-attack, and that was quite brilliant in many respects, because people were terrified of Mikhail Tal. You wouldn't give Tal like those positions, so he managed to get away with that with the Smyslov system. Huge amount of tension in the centre, which, as it resolved, it seems White's pieces were swarming around Black's king as this central tension resolved. These pieces swarming around the king, and this kind of gambit of a pawn here for superior piece quality of the rooks in particular. So this rook and this rook blasting down these two files. And some key move Queen B7, creating this battery. But it looks really dangerous way of playing, to be honest. But he got away with it tactically. His tactics were up for it. To be in this position temporarily a piece down. And he played calmly Queen B2, inviting Queen H5. So he navigates through this lot, finding a very important key move, otherwise he was up for the slaughter. Bishop D6 check. And he finds a position now where he can also temporarily, he can offer his queen for this nifty rook move. And the danger's gone, it seems. He's the exchange up now, and he makes way for his c-pawn resourcefully in the final phase. So that was quite a neat game, I thought. Quite impressive. I don't know what you guys think. So now you might think, actually, has he played Fischer? Has he ever beaten Fischer? He's beaten Fischer a few times, especially in Fischer's youth. Let's have a look at one of the Fischer wins. Chess.com notable game is actually a draw against Fischer, because I think of the My 60 Memorable Games book. But this was an interesting game. Sorry, I didn't mean to spoil the game result, but you probably guessed that that all the games shown tonight are going to be generally wins for Gligoric to celebrate his great chess. So I hope I haven't given the game away there. But as White, he's playing Fischer. Let's have a look at the game. Zurich, round 11, 1959. So Fischer's quite young still in his defence. 1959. E4. And actually, one of the features of this game is a nice endgame finish. Okay, C5. And we get the razor sharp Najdorf, which Fischer deeply specialised in before the time of computers. So razor sharp line, and this was now after E6 we have F4. Okay, and after Bishop E7 we have this very nice looking Queen F3 move, which looks like a really caveman idea coming up of playing G4 later. And the idea is, you take on F6 usually and you play G5, or Black's going to have double pawns and it's going to be in a difficult position to play. Sometimes. That sort of position occurred with Botvinnik on the black side against Bronstein in later matches. I think Bronstein had a lot of trouble against Botvinnik in this sort of line, but that's besides the point. Let's carry on. Knight BD7, White castles queenside, Queen C7, and we see the move G4. So one of the ideas is to take, and sometimes you're sacrificing the G5 pawn with check, just to get a raging initiative on the king side. Here, after B5, we see the idea that Black is accepting the double pawns though. So accepting some structural damage. And you might think, well, okay, this is a popular idea. What's the downside of this idea? Well, we're about to see a fantastic demonstration that actually that there's an endgame weakness. There is an exposable endgame weakness of this idea of doubling the pawns, because in doubling the pawns you're also isolating this pawn, and that might be an endgame target, h7, or this pawn could be dangerous. And also, of course, white has a 3-2 on the queen side. If we look at possible endgames, if we manage to get rid of lots of pieces later, the endgames for white might be quite good. 3-2, a weak pawn to target later on. So these are not as exciting as the real hack and slay variations when black plays g takes f6. But have a look at the elegance of what's coming up. So bishop g2, bishop b7, rook he1, black castles. So black's got this king safety aspect. Okay, he's not castling into any attack. a3, knight b6, and he's also got a comfortable c file and c4 square here, made even more comfortable with a3 because it's going to be difficult to kick that knight. Now rook d3, king b8, rook ed1. It looks quite quiet. What is white up to here? Well, d5, and we get some exchanges now. We're going to head towards this endgame scenario I've mentioned. We get e takes d5, and the first exchanges on board. First couple of minor pieces came off. Now bishop c5, and then another couple of minor pieces come off. Now knight e2, and a couple of rooks come off. And I'm accelerating fast for this because look at this endgame scenario now. So we've still got this 3-2 pawn majority over here, and we've still got this isolated pawn over here. Okay, black now liquidates the isolated h pawn by playing h5. Okay, and if white takes, you'd think, well, actually isn't white isolating two pawns here? Okay, but he does take, and now queen g2, as though that queen's quite good looking on that diagonal and over here. Rook h8, defending the back row. And a nasty pin now, rook c3. It looks fairly nasty, this pin. It's defended with rook c8 though, for the moment. In this position, this is setting a trap, I believe. I've just looked at this now, but I think b4 sets a trap. Or at least it doesn't look so hot. What can black play if b4... Well, actually, sorry, this was the game continuation. Pardon me. This was the game continuation. It's a nifty move. What does black play in this position? If I give you 20 seconds, just to make sure you're still awake. What does black play here? Can you guess the next move? Okay, it's not that complicated. Okay, bishop e3 check. It gets out of the pin because if takes, then there's queen takes c2. Okay, so basically the outcome of this is we get more exchanges now. After queen b6, the rooks come off. So we get this endgame scenario where, forget what I said, black hasn't got an isolated pawn. White's got this running h pawn, and he's got the 3-2 pawn majority. So that's the endgame scenario now. Okay, queen f3, hitting the bishop. Well, tying the queen down a bit, rather. King d8, and the h pawn moves. Okay, we got a runner here. King e7, h5, f5, h6. Black's making sure now that surely this pawn can be stopped with bishop d4 to stop this pawn. So black uses bishop d4, the bishop d4 resource, bishop d4, and that's taken off. So finally we've got a clear-cut endgame scenario now, where surely black has, Fischer has reduced any endgame issues. He got rid of his isolated pawn, but there's still this like 3-2. But you might think, well, that's suppressed, isn't it? Because this pawn is stopping two pawns. It's suppressing both a4 and c4, right? Well, we see Queen H1, nifty move, threatening H7, H8. Okay, Queen H8 blockading. And hang on a sec, isn't this double-edged to move this pawn forward because you're giving up G7? If you give up G7, king can come and munch this pawn, surely. Well, actually, H7 is played because there's a side effect created of the king coming to munch this pawn. This king's going to be far away from the queen side. You know, it's going to have to be Superman to come back if there was a problem on the queen side here. King F8, and this also allows now, remember black's got double pawns as well. This pawn's doing a good job against these three. This 1 versus the 3 is slowing that lot down. So white simply now plays check, takes the queen off, and guess what? In this position, what does white play in this position? If I give you 20 seconds starting from now. Okay, some of you have said A4. I wonder, does A4 win as well as C4? Actually, C4 was played. I wonder if A4 wins as well. C4 was played. Because after takes C5, this pawn's queening, the king can't get back. And if takes, then you just play A4. And you're queening. You know, you can play B5 and use the A pawn if you need to get a step away from the king. Let's just quickly check. Was A4 winning? That's an interesting question. Does A4 win as well? Or not? Probably the same, isn't it? I would imagine it's the same consequence if you're playing C4 later. Or is it? Hang on a sec. It looks like the same, yeah. That would have done as well. Okay, give yourself some points for that. Now, I can... I don't know why I feel kind of awake, but it's... I don't know. That was my set of games for this evening. We can kind of quickly review this game. It was actually an endgame transition game, so no major fireworks in the middle game. It was an endgame transition, a naughty endgame transition, where all of white's play. It seems, you know, based on that 3-2 on the queen side. Believe it or not, you can win games just like this, just using a pawn majority. From a feature from the opening to win an endgame. I thought it was pretty neat. It makes a contrast from the usual middle game slaughters. Pretty neat simplification to just a winning endgame there. Now, okay, so we're about an hour in, but there's 50 of you on stream. There's quite a few on Play Chess. Now, if you want, I can go over another game if you really want, or we can carry on. It's been more than now. I think we should carry on next week. So I hope you've enjoyed these games, and so rest in peace, Gligoric. So he died today, unfortunately. So he was a real chess legend, an influence on a major influence on the game. So there's a good wiki page on Gligoric to check out. So I'll upload this to YouTube, and maybe we can carry on some more games next week of Gligoric. Some of his games are actually, you know, really quite brilliant, as well as these games. Okay, thanks very much. Until next week.